City Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me here today. I'm your host, Richard Acritelli, and on today's episode of The Fog of War and Humanity here on HMTV, my special guest to the left of me is Colonel Jim Brennan. He will speak to me about his many years of military experience and his time right now as being a total veterans advocate. Jim, here we go. Where did you grow up, and what were your interests as a kid and a young adult?
Interesting question. I was born in Brooklyn, and but my father's a school teacher, and we moved out to Long Island when he got his first job, and then we stayed. I grew up in a little town called Coram, just south of Port Jefferson. Went to the local Catholic school, and then I ended up going to St. Anthony's when it was still in Smithtown, and then further moved on to college with a stop at Parris Island, South Carolina for 3 months to undergo basic training, and then went to college and finished my college education.
Now, to get back to your youth, what part of Brooklyn?
My family is from the Flatbush area of Brooklyn,
Okay.
near Brooklyn College. My grandparents lived there until 1980, and then moved out with us so we could help with them.
It seemed like, because we grew up near each other. I was in Port Jeff Station. You were in Coram.
Very close.
Right down Old Town Road, right?
I was right off Pine Road in 112.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just on the other side of North Ocean Avenue.
Years ago on the 10-year anniversary, I did the Diamond and Pines 9/11 Memorial right over there. And
I was not there when I lived there.
Yeah. That was all woods.
It was all woods, and in fact, the bus lot was back there, where
Sure.
all the school buses were parked.
And it was a lot of country on Route 112.
It was
and
all country.
Middle Country Road, right?
Davis
And
Peach Farm came
Yeah.
right up to Canal Road.
amazing. And all the sod farms went all the way back there. And
The sod farms going all the way up to 25A, and where we were corn and lettuce.
Did you play any sports at St. Anthony's?
I was a runner. I ran cross country and track while I was in school, and I did that through college, and pretty much my entire military career.
Did you run for Mr. Buckley?
I did. Don
Greatest guy, right? Donald Buckley?
Started off, Don was the cross country and track coach, and then halfway through, while I was at St. Anthony's, he became the athletic director.
I coached cross country, and I saw him at the St. Anthony's Invitational last week at Sunken Meadow. Still a great guy, the big mustache,
He is.
and
His son was
presence.
actually in my class, and
Adam, right?
Adam was. We were Buckley, Brennan. We were
right next to each other.
right over the top of each other, or right next to each other, all 4 years.
What did you think of the Catholic education?
Catholic education was challenging, being that it's based on a holistic approach where you get everything. You get religion, you get math, you get science, you get English, you get history.
You get some strict education.
And it's all
right?
pulled together, and it was strict. There was a passing average of 75.
Yeah.
And if you didn't make the cut, you didn't stay there very long.
There was no messing around.
There was no messing around.
One of my buddies, his kids go to school there, and he was from Port Jeff Station, and I asked him about the cell phone policy, and he said, yeah, well, you get in trouble after the third time, that's it, you're expelled.
Well, now there's no cell phones, period.
Yeah.
And it's actually been a really beneficial thing. Spoke with the principal, Brother David, and he said the kids are actually really happy about it because they're actually now talking to each other and having conversations.
And interacting, right?
It's been very worthwhile.
So now you look at your education at St. Anthony's. That had to help you with the military, right? Down the road, right?
It did. And, it's funny, the St. Anthony's colors are West Point's colors.
Yeah.
Because the initial brothers that came to found the school came from West Point.
Sure.
So they just brought the colors with them. That's
Go
why
Army,
it's black and gold.
Right.
But yeah, the foundational elements of my education tied with my upbringing, my parents and my grandparents set the foundation. I mean, my grandfather was a 20-year Army veteran, World War II veteran, and I wanted to be like my grandfather.
Where did your grandfather serve?
My grandfather served in the 3rd Infantry Division in North Africa.
Operation Torch, right?
That did the Sicily and Anzio. He did the Anzio landing and the Salerno landings.
Wow. So he was in the Mediterranean, and he did some tough fighting.
He was in it. His war stopped at Anzio. He was wounded pretty badly there and shipped back to England, but he didn't get to go home.
Yeah.
Because my grandfather was a fluent German speaker. So they held him, and he ended up staying all the way through till December of 45.
They didn't want to lose that source, right?
He was a translator for the last year and a half. He was deployed overseas.
So he's in Operation Torch, right? And Omar Bradley came out and said, we had to learn how to walk before we could run because the Germans were so far ahead of us. But the U.S. military is very progressive, very open to change very quickly. And then Sicily, right, is like the progression.
The U.S. methodology for primarily its leadership is the biggest distinction between the U.S. military and our opposition, so to speak. We push down responsibility all the way down to the lowest level and decision-making authority all the way down to the lowest level. During the World War II period, you had staff sergeants and sergeants making strategic level decisions. Sure. Today, you've got corporals and lance corporals making those decisions. The change in the nature of war and the technology, and particularly in the communications aspect of it, have enabled what used to be a battalion frontage to be manned almost by a squad or a fire team.
Like Marshall, straight from the top, he would get upset with his own senior officers when they bothered him with everything. Unless it was that pressing, you have to be able to take some responsibility, take some chances, try to make the best decisions possible. And I think, like you said, it went all the way down to the junior ranking.
That was a huge challenge for Marshall, Eisenhower, the leadership of the U.S. Army and the U.S. military at that time, because the way it was set up, they drew heavily from the reserve contingent. And a lot of the senior officers that drew up were used to being on horseback.
Sure, cavalry.
And cavalry.
Out west.
And didn't understand the modern mechanized warfare, particularly tank warfare.
That's it's something, because we grew up near each other, but we both had family members in Brooklyn, and my grandfather pulled artillery pieces during the Great Depression in Flatbush.
Yeah,
with my Uncle Bay.
There. Yeah,
with my Uncle Bay, who was in the bombers, and they were horse soldiers.
Well, World War II, the war became three-dimensional. And the leadership that existed in the reserve was very two-dimensional in its thought process. Even artillery became a third dimension because it wasn't just massed fires. It was they started using precision fires, the innovation of the variable time fuse, being able to use artillery for multiple things to include air defense. That wasn't a World War I concept. They weren't shooting down airplanes with artillery in World War I. It was primarily used for pounding the trenches. World War II, it became mobile. It became varied in its uses, not just for defending and preparing the battlefield, but also for intervention of aircraft.
Yeah, even the Germans, right, with their 88s, they did a lot of damage, especially to
very good weapon
planes,
system.
Right?
I mean, even today, two weapon systems, that and the M250 cal, have never been replaced.
Amazing, right?
The M250 cal was designed in the 19 teens, and it's still in primary use today throughout the U.S. military.
Now, you talked to your grandfather. Were there things that he spoke to you about? Was he open to talking about it?
Not when I was younger. As I got older and I became interested in going into the military. In fact, he's the one that pushed me towards the Marine Corps. He said, the Marine Corps is what's going to fit you. And you're an athlete, you're a student. You're a
disciplined kid.
Yeah, that's
right?
You're going to get drawn to that. He actually didn't actively push me away from the Army, but he said, the Army and the Marine Corps are similar, but you're going to be happiest in the Marine Corps just based on your personality. So as he got older and I got older, he became more open about the things that happened and what happened to him.
Did he talk about the fighting in Italy because you had the mountains and
No,
Anzio was a little rough? That was there,
not
right?
until the very end of his life. My grandfather suffered from what now you would call post-traumatic stress disorder. At the time, they called it battle fatigue or
Shell shock.
And he managed it his whole life. Thank God for my
Which is amazing, right?
Yeah, thank God for my grandmother, because my grandmother was his rock and helped him get through all that. In a lot of ways, my wife has done the same thing for me, whether I like it or not. 4 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan,
Your family's certainly done a lot for this nation.
Even though I was not personally in direct combat, I mean, the experiences I had certainly weighed on me, particularly as I've gotten older. At the time it was like I just brushed it off, but my wife knows, and now I know that I didn't brush them off. I just buried them and boxed them up, and at some point they come bubbling to the surface.
So now you graduate St. Anthony's, right? You go straight into the military?
3 days after I graduated, I was on the Yellow Footprints at Parris Island, South Carolina.
Did you go to the recruiter in quorum?
I did.
A recruiter in quorum?
I did.
Right on Middle Country Road?
Yeah, Route 25 right there, that glass office building.
That's I went there for the Army,
that's where they had all the armed services recruiting at the time, and that's where I initially got recruited from.
When did you start thinking about it? When you were a junior, maybe?
No, probably when I was a sophomore. I had always been interested in it, and I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I'm the only one that ever had any interest in it, and I ended up making a career out of it. My siblings were all smart people, and they've done various things, different disciplines. But I'm the only one that really was gravitated towards the military and towards service.
So now you go to Parris Island. You're a disciplined kid. You're in St. Anthony's. Play a couple different sports. Sharp kid. I'm sure you kept your nose out of trouble, right? Because you had an old-fashioned family. What was the biggest challenges that you had at Parris Island?
It was funny because coming from that background and being put into a platoon with kids from all over the country with varying degrees of education and family support, it was eye-opening. For the most part, I realize now that I came from kind of a homogenous environment where most of the people around me, regardless of their religion or their race, were very similar to mine from an upbringing standpoint. And then I get into a platoon where I got guys from the backwoods of Louisiana and the mountains of Montana.
Or even upstate New York, right?
Yeah, upstate New York. It was an eye-opening experience. Not everyone had the level of education that I had. Everyone was a high school graduate.
You had a formal education,
but my education was very different than a lot of my peers. And my hat's off to all of them for the discipline and the desire and the understanding to making something out of themselves, and every one of them did.
Do you think you were from Quorum, New York, Long Island, blue-collar, middle-class family? You grew up with different groups of people, different races, ethnic groups, religions, wealth on Long Island, right?
Yes.
That had to help you in terms of being in the service and coexisting with others, right?
It did, from the standpoint that I was comfortable in multiple environments. Particularly as I moved up in my career, I was just as comfortable being with the PFC as I was with the 4-star general. In fact, I ended up working at our liaison office at the House of Representatives, and I worked daily with congressmen and women, and I worked daily with our most senior officers in the Marine Corps. And I was just as comfortable working with the staffer as I was with the congressman.
Sure. That's a lot to be said about that, right? I mean,
it's a unique experience, but as a military officer, you need to have that capability to be able to speak to anybody and to be able to adjust your presentation to meet those needs. What you would say to the manner of speaking you use for a senior officer and the manner of speaking you use for a PFC can be very different things. Not saying that the PFC is less educated or not not smart enough to be able to understand. But in a lot of ways, they don't have the background and experience to be able to intuitively understand what you're saying when you're presenting it at a higher level. So you have to adjust it so
be flexible,
so
right?
that they understand what it is that you're trying to convey.
You know, U.S. Grant and Eisenhower were kind of like those guys, right?
Very much so.
They're brilliant generals, West Point guys. They reached the height of their profession and even political in terms of being presidents. But they were like regular guys, though. They were very good athletes. They came from humble backgrounds, both Midwestern guys.
Principled.
Yeah, and they knew what like the volunteer was going through because they weren't far from that.
No, they were not. They grew up from humble beginnings and never lost sight of where they came from.
And they were very good writers. You knew what the orders were. They were easy to understand from, the general all the way down to the private. And
one of the greatest innovations came from Marshall was the 5-paragraph order. And that process enables anybody to understand the who, what, when, where, and why things need to be done. And it's still in use today. He put it together for the post-war reconstruction in Germany so that everyone would understand. And now it is the standard and has been the standard for the last 80 years.
People don't realize, and I think FDR said it best, when he was wrestling with the idea of who was going to command Overlord, right, at Normandy. Was he going to allow Marshall? Because Marshall's waiting in the wings, and that was really his key opportunity, or to keep Eisenhower there. And he said, nobody remembers the Army Chief of Staff from the Civil War, which was Halleck, right? Mm-hmm. Who do they remember? They remember Grant. And what did Marshall say? Wherever you order me, that is what I'll do. And he made it that simple.
He was a key person that held everything together.
And modernized the Army.
And the Air Forces and the Navy. But he was in a key position as the Chief of Staff of the Army, what would now today be considered the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Yeah.
That was his role.
There was a good story about Marshall. He was down like in Benning, and there was guys getting sick because it must have been like World War I or turn of the century barracks, right? And guys were sick. They couldn't train. So like, well, we need stoves to heat these places up. These guys are getting cold at night. And Marshall said, I don't care what you have to do. Don't worry about the paperwork. Beg, borrow, and steal, and get these guys and fix it. Because then they can't train, and then we can't count on them because we're expected to send these guys overseas. And it was very simple. I don't care about the I's and the T's. Just do it.
Get it done.
Get it done.
And that's pretty much become a mantra for our modern U.S. military is we figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah.
And you don't always get the resources you need. You don't always get the time or the personnel you need, but you got to get the job done.
Sure.
And you figure out a way to make it happen.
And that's where we're light years ahead of some of these other countries, right?
And that's why, everybody plays in this. Everyone knows what the end state is, and that PFC can come up with the best idea in the world that makes it happen.
Sure. And
that's why it works.
Now, you go to Parris Island, right? You graduate. Mm-hmm. Where do you go after that?
I started college.
But what was your training? Do you go?
I didn't go to training. What I did was I went to boot camp. Then I OJT'd for the first year. I was a combat engineer.
Okay.
So I was going to school in Lynchburg College, which is now the University of Lynchburg, in Lynchburg, Virginia.
South Central
Virginia.
Virginia, right?
And then there was my reserve unit was right there in Lynchburg. It was a combat engineer unit. And I drilled and OJT'd. I was going to go to formal school the next summer, but in between I got selected for officer candidate school.
How was that, the transition from Quorum, Long Island to Lynchburg, Virginia?
It was different, but it was very welcome. I was, unfortunately I grew up and I had really never been out of the state of New York, growing up. My first 18 years, first time I was on an airplane was when I flew to Parris Island. So I wanted to see more. I wanted to experience more. And it's funny, over my lifetime, I've ended up living in 9 different states. I've been to 46 of the 50 states. and I've been to over 40 countries.
So this was the start of it for you.
And that was the start.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I love Virginia. Virginia's a beautiful state, not just from its picturesque mountains and beaches, but the people there are fantastic.
Now, what were you studying in college?
I studied business. Okay. I knew I was going into the military, and I wanted a discipline that was going to translate a little bit because I knew I was going to end up doing my own budgets. I was going to end up doing logistics. I was going to end up doing
a lot of staff work. Right?
Yeah, staff work at some point. And business flowed better with that. So it gave me a broader approach. I got my BA in business administration. I didn't focus on accounting or finance or marketing. I took the holistic approach to it, and it did apply very well. So when I had to sit down and create budgets for my calendar year, as you know, starting as a captain, I knew what I was doing.
So now you're a colonel. You have your education. Do you get your master's later on?
I do. First, I went to the Marine Corps School of Advanced Warfighting, which is the second year of the Command and Staff College.
Okay.
And I got a master's degree in operational studies, and went and I commanded an artillery battalion. And following that, I went to the Naval War College and got a master's of science degree in national strategy and security.
Now, is that up in Newport? The Naval
That's
War?
in Newport, Rhode Island.
Pretty serious school.
It was
right?
a very serious school. It's a 2 years master's degree program crammed into 10 months.
Yeah.
So the workload was pretty hard.
Yeah. A lot of late nights and a lot of doing work.
You
right?
you had to be disciplined in what you're doing if you were going to get anything out of it. And I enjoyed every minute I was there, but mentally, by the end of it, you were pretty
tired. Yeah.
You were pretty drained.
And that's for the younger officers. They see something in you where they think you're going to kind of keep moving up. You're going to stay in the military, right? And
well, at that point, I was a senior officer. I was a lieutenant colonel when I went, major when I went to the first school, and then I had just been promoted to colonel. But normally the school is for lieutenant colonels. In the Navy would be commanders and captains, and it's the top level school. I mean, it was a challenge.
There's something to be said about being accepted to go there and finishing it.
Marine Corps selection rate for top level school is somewhere between 10 and 12%.
Wow!
So it's
not much.
Not a big selection rate.
So now you're down in Virginia. You're looking at becoming an engineer, right? In terms of the military, you graduate college. Do you go in active duty?
I went active duty from there. I went to the basic school at Quantico, Virginia, and I ended up becoming an artilleryman. I started off as an engineer, but ended up going into artillery, and for the most part, because my grandfather's influence. My grandfather was a field artilleryman during World War II and throughout his career, and I kind of followed in those footsteps.
You remembered some of his stories?
I did. In fact, while he was in North Africa and Italy, his battery was 105 howitzers, and my first unit had the same howitzers. Wow. M101 Alpha 1, 105 millimeter howitzers.
So it's a special memory for you, right?
It is.
Experience, right?
And the breech block has the date that they were manufactured and all the gun books. And 2 of my howitzers were at Tinian and Saipan.
And you did all that at Quantico, or you went to different bases?
I did my initial training at Quantico, and once I finished that, I went to my formal school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, for artillery, and then my first duty station was Camp Lejeune with 10th Marines.
Fort Sill was big sky country out there.
Yeah. Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. I mean, you're in that same channel running down from Montana, but Oklahoma is very, very different environment from here. Lots of plains, copses of trees, lakes all over the place, critters here and there.
A lot of room in terms
lots of room.
Firing those weapons, right?
Yeah. Ideal place to be for artillery.
Did you ever go, I had students, 4 boys, the LaRusso brothers. They all were captains of the lacrosse team from West Point. And 3 of them were artillery officers. So they would send me these videos, right? And I'm like, are you guys out in Nevada somewhere? like, no, we're in the middle of Washington State. There was a desert up in Washington State. Did you ever go up there?
East, near where, what is it, Tacoma? There's a Army base up there. It's proving grounds where they go out and shoot. I never shot there. My best assignment as an artilleryman was 29 Palms, California, in the high desert north of Palm Springs. The Marine Corps has a base there.
Sure.
It's got almost 1,000 acres of land, and 95% of it is impact area.
Some rough country out there,
we'd be
right?
driving right through an area that we just shot at.
Wow.
Whereas in a lot of other bases, your impact area is nobody goes in there. You just shoot into it because you can't maneuver through it. But 29 Palms is very different. So you got to do everything real world in a lot of ways. Shoot off your own survey to be able to do some of the things that you couldn't necessarily do when I was at Camp Lejeune. I couldn't do it there because of the safety concerns that you had.
Okay, we're going to come back for a second episode here with Colonel Jim Brennan back here on HMTV and the Fog of War and Humanity.